Today, we're going to take a look at module number 3. Well, this is basically module number 3 after modules 1 and 2, or last Monday and Tuesday. And the module for today is about learning to serve and its connection to character formation. So what we have in store for the afternoon as our roadmap are the following goals or objectives. The first one has something to do with making sure that we understand the idea or the central concept of the session. Learning to serve has something to do with service learning. So therefore, it is important for us to define service learning. The second goal for the session is we will make a connection between service learning and character education or character development. And perhaps this is probably the core of the session because we are interested in a methodology, in a curriculum that is service learning. But probably more important than service learning is the connection of that particular method or model of the curriculum to what we call character education. And the third one, and hopefully we will still have the time, is to take a look at what are the effective online service learning strategies in the level of the classroom. So we will try to fit in the 2 hours allotted for us in this particular session to be able to go through the 3 very important session goals and with a focus on number 2. So before we take a look at the session goals, before we take a look at the first session goal, I would just like to introduce myself. Sorry for the noise. I live near a hospital. So let's now take a look at the, okay, just like what I said a while ago, let me just introduce myself. So I am Ernie GRIO. I am with the School of Education and Human Development of the University of Asia and the Pacific. And Man and I decided that I will give this particular session because this module on service learning is something that is very close to my heart. I'm very passionate about social studies education, but I think more than social studies education is what we call service learning across the curriculum. And this particular session, just like what I mentioned a while ago, is indeed very important because we're going to see the connection between service learning, the learning to serve, because students have to be taught how to serve. They have to learn how to serve. It is not natural for the students to serve. There's a certain process, a certain methodology, a kind of coaching, certain activities that would allow them to be exposed and fall on this particular type of learning model and character education. Because we all know that when we talk about catalysts, one thing that comes into mind is character education. And I will bring into the picture not only what I have read about service learning, what I know about character education, but also my years of experience as the chairman and a member and a trainer of the Philippine Center for Civic Education and Democracy. So during my time at PCCED, we went around the country to Muslim Mindanao, to Cebu, to Bohol, to Baguio, to be able to train teachers from the private schools, from the public schools, about about what service learning is all about. So these are the goals. And I would like now to invite everyone to think about your goals. Why did you decide to attend this particular session? So number 1, what is service learning? Why is service learning important? Number 2, is there a connection between service learning and character education or character development? And number 3, what are the effective online service learning strategies? Because we find ourselves in the context of the pandemic and we have to rely on technology to be able to deliver effective teaching or effective instruction. So I would now like to ask everyone to take a look at your own goals. And hopefully when you think about those goals, that those goals of yours, personal goals, are also aligned with the roadmap for today. You can write down your goals if you want. You can probably send them to the chat box so that later on I'll be able to take a look at your notes. So before we take a look at goal number 1, which is basically what what service learning is all about, I would like to invite everyone to take a look at this quotation coming from Bob Dylan, a musician. And he said, when you talk about a hero, who is he someone who understands his own responsibility? Because with freedom comes responsibility. And this particular session is actually an invitation, my personal invitation for everyone to take a hard look at service learning, particularly the connection between service learning and character education. Because I think it is important for teachers to have a repertoire, a group of strategies that they could use inside the classroom, in their classes, in order for them to be able to fulfill not only the demands of the curriculum, but also the needs and the interests of the children or our students. Because in the end, what is important are the children more than the content and more than the curriculum. So therefore, when we take a look at service learning today, we're going to expound on our idea of pedagogical creativity, because we're going to add a new method to our repertoire of teaching methods and strategies. And we will take a look at the evidences, research findings, evidence-based education, evidence-based teaching. Why is it worthwhile to spend time studying, planning, implementing, and evaluating service learning in our classrooms? Because in the end, our students will benefit from it. So let's move on and take a look at the first goal. And the first goal is important because it gives us a foundation of what this methodology is all about. Some call it a model of the curriculum. But many people, many experts agree that it's a pedagogical model. It's a pedagogical model. So let's take a look at what service learning is all about. And I would like now to ask everyone again to think about this particular question. When you hear the word learning to serve, service learning, what is the first word, probably the first sentence or the first phrase that comes to mind? So think about it, service learning. I'm going to give you probably a minute. I must have heard it before, or better, I am using it right now. Meaning to say, last school year, 2 school years ago, or this school year, I am using service learning. Despite the fact that we find ourselves in the midst of the pandemic. So what is service learning? And probably a follow-up question is, why am I using service learning? What are the advantages of using service learning? All right, let's take a look at several definitions. And the first definition that we're going to take a look at is this particular definition. So as you can clearly see in this particular slide, it's a methodology. You can interpret the methodology by saying it's a pedagogical method, something to do with a certain technique, a certain method, a group of steps Some would say it's a model of the curriculum because it's more than a teaching method. But what is important here in this particular definition is we realize there are three very important points that we need to understand. The first one has something to do with academic and social skills. So when we talk about service learning is geared towards the development not only of concepts, of skills that are directly in the curriculum, but even social and emotional skills in the curriculum. So we have here what we call academic and social skills and knowledge. The second point that we will have to take note of is we have to talk about service. And that particular point regarding service is connected to the community because the students now will have to use their academic and social skills that they will learn from the teacher, that they will learn from their classmates in order for them to serve in the community, to be able to meet the needs of the people in that community. Whether that community is a school, the entire school, whether that particular community is the barangay or a town. So very important then, service in order to address the real needs of the community. But when the students serve, it is always tied up to the curriculum. It is always aligned with the curriculum. In order to illustrate this particular point then, when we talk about academic and social skills that the students will have to learn, it is not limited to the classroom. Because remember, they will have to go out of the classroom. They will have to go out of the school in many instances. They will have to interview people in the community. They will have to converse with people in the community. They will have to observe. They will have to gather information. And therefore, it becomes a more powerful type of learning. Because this particular type of learning is hinged on experience. They learn from their experience. But it is not a kind of experience that has no objectives, no set of objectives, or no set of goals. Because do remember, and later on we will go back to it, right? The 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 activities of the students in the community are aligned with the demands of the curriculum. So they learn from experience. The second point is when we talk about service learning, it empowers the students. Because later on, you would realize when you take a look at the steps in service learning, that they have a voice, that they have a choice. That when they go to the community, when they serve in the community, they will have to identify the issues that are closest to the heart of the people who live in that community. The issues, the challenges, the dilemmas, the hurdles that will make a difference in the lives of the people who live in that particular community. And therefore, they are not only receiving instruction coming from the teacher, but they have a voice because they have a choice. The third one is when we talk about service learning, it is very much close to citizenship or civic education or civic learning. But at the same time, let us not close our eyes to the possibility that it is a method that goes beyond a subject areas. In fact, it goes beyond social studies. It can be applied in science, it can be used in math, it can be used in English, which later on we will try to take a look at. So that's the first one, academic and social skills. And therefore, we say it is aligned with the curriculum. Whatever the students will learn, whatever the students will, will observe, will tackle, and need an interest in the community that will make a difference in the lives of people in that community, it is aligned with the curriculum, their school curriculum. The second point in that particular definition has something to do with community needs. And I would like you to take a look at certain certain activities that the students may be able to implement in a community. It's a form of service that will answer the needs of the people who live in that community. So for example, they can take a look at a project wherein they will adopt a home for they will adopt a home for the aged members of the community or the barangay, or they will probably implement a food drive for impoverished members of the community. And because elections is just around the corner in next year, they can help new voters to register for an upcoming elections. Or if we are not comfortable, for example, students going out of the school, especially when we can already hold face-to-face classes, that such service learning could be in the school only. It can be an individual class or an entire school cleanup drive. So as you can clearly see here, these particular activities that has something to do with service learning are all about answering the needs of the people who live in a certain community in order for the students to be able to serve them. And therefore, we realize then that if the first one that was mentioned a while ago is the fact that service learning is aligned to the curriculum, service learning must have something to do with a partnership with the people who live in the community. It has to be a partnership, for example, with perhaps the Sangguniang Barangay, perhaps with an NGO, perhaps with another school. For example, a public school, a public high school, partnering with a public elementary school, or a private school in a partnership with a public school. And so therefore, the students are exposed to people who are not only members of their own class, members of their own school, but members in a wider community. And this is the reason why when we talk about service learning, it is almost equated with social studies. But just like what I said a while ago, when we talk about citizenship, when we talk about civic education, it goes beyond the confines of social studies. Because most especially because of sustainability issues, climate change, etc., math, science, literature, the other subjects definitely, they have something to do with citizenship. Okay, I would like to again take a look at your notes about service learning. So I have given you some examples regarding the service learning projects. At the same time, the very first definition of what service learning is all about, particularly its connection with the curriculum. Meaning to say, service learning will never be service learning without an alignment with the curriculum. It has to take a look at the standards, the demands of the curriculum. At the same time, we have to take note of the fact that it cannot be service learning if the students will not explore, will not partner, and will not be interested in what is happening in the community. Because they are there in order to help the members of the community solve certain problems. If not solve certain problems, explore certain problems, perhaps leading to solutions later on. So what are other service learning projects? And this is important because perhaps this is your initial attempt to be able to take a look at looking at the context of my own school, especially in the context that we are doing online teaching and learning. If I'm going to use this particular method, what particular service learning activity will I come up with? Let's take a look at the second definition to have a clearer picture of what service learning is all about. And here, in this particular definition, I would like to emphasize the point regarding intentional and learning. Intentional learning activities. We have mentioned a while ago that there is an integration between service, you integrate service in the community. Because the students will serve in the community to be able to address certain issues, certain gaps, certain challenges in the community. whether those challenges has something to do with probably cleanliness, bullying, probably safety of the community members, or helping them in their livelihood, etc. Now, the other point about service learning is that number one, it is intentional and it is all about learning. Because the students, when they go to the community, they learn from the curriculum, but they also learn from the community members. And the community members also learn from them. And therefore, we have to emphasize intentional and learning. Now, I would like now the participants for today to again take a look at examples of service learning activities. Number 1, 2, 3, 4. And again, if you're not comfortable asking your students, particularly when we go back to face-to-face classes to go out of the school, it's also possible to come up with a reading and writing buddies program within the school. Within the school. So take a look at the service learning activities. Like for example, number 2, they participate, they come up with, they research about, because it is a certain issue that the community wants them to help solve regarding bullying. So probably among certain schools in that community, right, bullying is a problem. And the students decided to take a look at the topic of bullying, that they will come up with, they have chosen bullying, they will come up with data gathering, they will come up with a solution, and that particular solution will be forwarded to people who can do something about it, probably certain school officers, because here schools are involved. Or if you take a look at number 4, perhaps there's a need to plan and implement a beautification of the barangay, a certain section of the barangay, perhaps the playground. All right. So these are again service learning activities. Now here, we have to take note then, because of that particular definition regarding intentional and learning, a two-pronged approach regarding service learning. One, yes, it is connected with the curriculum. So for example, a high school class, they have chosen to do service learning in order to improve the playground in the barangay. So they don't have to buy, they don't have to donate. But what they needed to do was to observe how people use the playground. They need to gather information regarding what are the things that are needed in that particular playground in order for that playground to attract more children. They will have to take a look at the safety of the children in that playground. So they will have to gather information. After they have gathered information, right, they will now present the information and argue that there is a need to improve the playground. Perhaps the barangay captain together with the Sangguniang Barangay will be the audience. But everything that they will do, gathering information, writing a proposal, etc., are always connected to the curriculum. As you can clearly see here, these are examples of the English language arts curriculum standards. In gathering information, in trying to interpret the information, in trying to write a plan, they will have to take a look at the standards of the curriculum. Meaning to say, the teachers will have to teach them how to plan, how to gather information based on certain standards of the curriculum. And this reminds us then regarding the intentional, because when you say intentional, they have to reflect. So one very important aspect of service learning, besides being connected to the curriculum, addressing the needs of the community members because there is a gap, etc., is number 3. The students learn because they reflect on their learning. So for example, you have journal entries or a learning log. And the reflection does not only happen at the tail end of a certain project. It does not happen only in the beginning. But if a service learning project would take place, for example, for an entire quarter or a month, then they could have weekly, okay, or probably bi-weekly. And if you are looking at a 2-month service learning project, if you have bi-weekly, it's more than 3 times that the students will be able to sit down and to be able to reflect on what they have learned, whether it's a journal entry or a learning lab. And therefore, you realize it's intentional. It's intentional learning. Aligned with the curriculum, they go out in the community, interact with community members to be able to serve and address community needs. But number 3, they have to reflect on their learning. And when we talk about reflecting on their learning, it's also important for us to consider the fact that when they reflect on their learning, they spend time doing metacognition. It's not only reflecting about what they have learned in terms of the content, in terms of what they have learned about the community, their contributions to the community, but also it's also important to take note of the fact that they are reflecting because they have to go back to certain errors in judgments, certain mistakes that they may have committed, and they can learn from these mistakes. That's why it's intentional learning. And before we take a look at the third and last definition, I would like now to alert the participants that there are many service learning models. For example, Habitat for Humanity, the We Schools movement, Learning to Give, and of course, Project Citizen, because this is basically the model that was espoused by the Philippine Center for Civic Education and Democracy. And let me just, these are pictures of the PCCED portfolio presentations. If I'm not mistaken, these pictures were taken in Makati. So this is the model. So we can skip number 1 and number 2. We can probably lump number 3 and number 4 into one step. Identify, okay, and select a problem. What are the problems in the community? If we have 5 problems in the community, a group of students doing service learning will now select one important problem from a group of 5 problems that they think will make an impact in that community. If we take a look at 5 and 6, we can probably say it's just one step. So identify and select a problem. The second one is they will do data gathering or research. And more than data gathering or research would mean it could be library research. More than data gathering is they will organize the data. So based on the topic that they have chosen, they will research about the topic. Okay, is it a problem of bullying? Is it a problem of safety of the students in crossing the street? Okay, is it a problem because many students, when they come to school, they come in empty stomach and therefore they cannot pay attention to the teacher? So therefore it's poverty, helping in the alleviation of poverty, etc. And then we take a look at 8. Okay, we take a look at number 8. It's developing an action plan. What can we do? What can we propose, right? What can we do? What can we propose in order for us to be able to help understand the problem or help solve the problem? And of course, the last one is they will come up with a portfolio. And in that making of the portfolio, they will present the portfolio to a real world audience. And that real world audience are people who can do something or who need to understand that particular issue or challenge in the community. So this is a model. This is a model of service learning. This is Project Citizen. So again, we go back to the curriculum. If you take a look at this particular model, okay, there are 10 steps, but we can easily say there are just 4 steps. Identify and select a problem. Number 2, do research, gather the data, and organize the data, interpret the data, come up with a policy solution, which is an action plan. And then the fourth one, develop the portfolio, right? And then present the portfolio to people who need to understand that particular issue, who need to probably, who can or in a position to be able to solve that particular issue. And we go back again that it's not limited to social studies. And later on, we'll take a look at how can service learning be applied in English, in Filipino, in science, in the senior high school subjects. Now, let's now take a look at another definition of service learning, which is basically the last leg. And we will be able to have a complete understanding of what service learning is all about. And I would like to highlight again the keyword structured reflection activities. A while ago, we did talk about reflection. And our example are journal entries and learning logs because we said the third very important component of service learning is the fact that the students will have to find time. The teacher will have to find time, will have to create time to create activities, opportunities for the students to reflect on their learning. Kulang if it is only aligned with the curriculum, kulang if, let us say, number two is present wherein they will serve in the community in order to be able to make an impact in the lives of people in the community. Because remember, it's service learning. Learning has to be intentional. And the fourth one then that I would like to point out is the importance of the teacher. Because despite the fact that the students will be working with, with the fact that they will have to regulate themselves, they will have to own the program, right? They will have voice, they will have a choice, etc. The teacher plays a critical role because of the fact that service learning must also be structured. Not only in the reflection, but in certain methods that the students will have to use in order for them to be able, for example, to gather information, sense of the information about a certain problem in a locality. So here, structured. And indeed, this is about civic education, citizenship, because service learning, as you can see in that particular third and last definition, is about inculcating love for country, inculcating the fact that we have certain responsibilities as citizens of the country. And when we talk about responsibilities, then we cannot shy away from those responsibilities. We need to serve. And here, there are many activities that promote citizenship. As you can clearly see here in this particular slide, environmental cleanup projects, volunteering to be able to help senior citizens, or assisting probably online with voter registration efforts, etc. So that's one. But a more important aspect of that definition are 2 points that I would like to emphasize. The first one is because we are dealing with structure, right? Structure, and we are dealing with the fact that the teacher plays a critical role. The teacher will have to teach them how to read, how to write, how to reflect, how to think on a higher level, higher order thinking. And therefore, there are certain methods that the teacher will have to introduce in the class that is doing service learning in order for them to be able to write well, to be able to gather information well, to be able to interpret the information. An example is in an English class that is doing service learning, they can use the MISO technique. Number one, number two, number three, number four. Media, not only video, but probably blogs, probably certain journal articles, certain books. They analyze the video and other reference materials. They will have to come up with an interview questionnaire. If you're dealing with grade school students, a simple interview guide, because they will have to talk to people. Remember, they will go into the community. They will have to have conversations or dialogue with people in the community. And after the interview, probably they will come up with a survey so that they can reach out to more people. And then observation, because they will have to spend time in the community. So the things that they have gathered in the video media, the interview, the survey, the observation, that's data. Then they will interpret the data and they'll be able to come up with a proposed solution or probably an angle of a better understanding of the problem if they cannot propose a solution. So therefore, we realize then that if service learning, this is an example, uses techniques like the MISO in an English class, which could also be used in a science class, in a social studies class, and therefore what I'm trying to hint at is service learning could also be interdisciplinary. Several subject areas will collaborate. This highlights the key role of the teacher because the teacher will have to introduce these techniques. And the other point regarding intentional is they will reflect. But remember, when we talk about reflection on the part of the students, right? It's not only about writing an online journal entry or a journal log, or for example, gathering around in a group and they are engaged, for example, with the group, their service learning group, and they try to assess and evaluate what they have learned. But also, because we are in character education, an activity that we can use is what we call the legacy plaque, or what experts call the legacy plaque. And then in that legacy plaque, a very important question is asked. And this particular question is, at the end of the service learning project, okay, how do you want to be remembered? What is your contribution to the service learning project? Or probably before we begin the service learning project, this particular question could be asked because you can use a legacy plaque. Meaning to say, when we talk about intentional, there are certain steps, there are techniques. And these techniques and steps, these methods come from the teacher. And they allow the students to reflect on their learning, to be able to make sense of their learning because of the fact that the teachers provided them with those opportunities to do so. So the keyword there is intentional. So we have four. Number one, definitely aligned with the curriculum. We are not setting aside the curriculum. In fact, okay, the curriculum becomes robust, becomes strong because of an opportunity for the students to learn the curriculum outside of the classroom. Number two, this particular method is in partnership with people outside of the school, with the barangay, with an NGO, with another school. Or if you are working within the school, a partnership of your class with another class, perhaps in the lower level or in the higher level, right? Number three, it has something to do with reflection because the center point of service learning is not only to serve, but rather the learner. What did the learner learn from that particular activity? How did the learner change because of that particular activity? And the fourth one is intentional. And in the intentional, here, the critical role of the teacher comes into the picture. So four, I would like now to invite you again, okay? So think about what are the other service learning projects? Or perhaps if you have been using service learning for the past year, even during the pandemic or for the past several years, what are other service learning projects? And those activities, are they up to the standards, the four standards that we have explained a while ago regarding service learning? Number one, do they stem from the curriculum? Are they aligned with the curriculum? Number two, Did they invite the students to reflect on their learning? Number three, was I intentional? Was I there to coach them, to give them feedback, to provide them with techniques, with methods, with steps in order for them to make the most out of this experience? Number four, were there partnerships with the community? Because they need a real world audience. They need to apply what they have learned in a real world setting. And when they present, they should not only present to people in the school who will evaluate or grade them, no matter how important that particular point is. But they need to present to people who can do something about that particular issue in the barangay, in the town, in another school, etc. So summary then is when we talk about a service learning program, and again, our argument is the students should be taught how to serve. They have to learn how to serve. It does not come naturally. It's just like managing a class. There has to be high expectations. There has to be rules. There has to be procedures, right? There has to be a climate conducive to learning. There has to be positive relationships. And the teacher tries to create all of these things in order to have that particular winning program inside the classroom, just like service learning. So number one, meaningful. It answers the needs of the community. Number two, comes from, stems from, aligned with the curriculum. Number three, the students will reflect. They will have to reflect on their learning. Number four, it's a partnership with a real world audience, an NGO, another school, or if you would like to restrict your service learning to your own school, a partnership with another class, another section, and then student voice. It celebrates the learner. It celebrates not only the learner, but also, but the thing is, it celebrates what we call the strengths of the learner. And we will expound on this one later. So think about these points about service learning. Okay, so I would like now to give you a minute to think about service learning, particularly the points that we have raised in the three definitions of service learning. And then if you have a question, you can write your question, you can send it through the chat box, or you can jot it down.